Hello and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. You're with me, Ruudz. It's Monday afternoon here in South Africa, and we will witness on Saturday to an historic test between the Springboks and Portugal in Bloemfontein. A sellout crowd, a historic match, as I mentioned, the first time Portugal get to play in South Africa, and they really were proud and honoured to have the opportunity to play the World Championship side in the Springboks. And what a test match it was. As I mentioned, the crowd were out in full support, and it went a little bit awry, should I say, in the first few minutes. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But before I do go any further, do hit the like and subscribe on the channel and give your questions in the live comment section. What were your thoughts of the game, your standout performers, and what you think? Were there more questions? Were there more answers for Rassie as we head to the Rugby Championship? On the discussion today, we're going to be talking about the test match, going through some of the day's events, obviously, with some player mentions, the debutants, and then, of course, as we look forward to the Rugby Championship, a couple of interesting selections that will be on the cards for Rassie and the management side. A couple of players putting up their hands. I'd be interested to see or hear from you guys what you think, who did and who did not perform in this one-off historic test match. The Springboks, of course, triumphant by 64 points to 21. The result never in doubt. It's just the debutants, as we mentioned, all 7 of them getting an opportunity. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that on the show today. So firstly, I just want to say thank you to Portugal, or as we would say in Portuguese, Obrigado, for their participation in this match. They were honoured, as I mentioned. Thomas Appleton, the captain, was very proud prior to the game, talking in a couple of interviews, saying it's a momentous occasion for Portugal to be playing against the World Championship side in the Springboks, back-to-back winners. So they'll go home with a lot of smiles, no doubt, and a lot of lessons, I'm sure, learned for them. They were full of running, and in fact, Portugal got the first try of the match, but that wasn't before we had Andre Esterhuizen red-carded, or initially he was yellow-carded for an incident deemed World Rugby to be head-to-head contact. Enough mitigation, or no mitigation, should I say, for anything other than a red card. So it was upgraded, and we ended up playing the game with 14 men for pretty much 77 minutes of the match. So take that into account as well. As I mentioned, give your comments in the comments section. I'd like to engage with the fans on what their thoughts were. A shout out, of course, first and foremost, as we say, to who's become a real household name in South African rugby, and that's Makazole Mapimpi with the hat-trick. As they would say in that World Cup final, Ipabli, Shampompo, Shampizi. He was simply sensational, going up to 30 tries, and he's just too short of Jacques Fourie, who's in that third position. We've got obviously Brian Abana up there with 67 tries, followed by Joost van der Westhuizen with 38, Jacques Fourie on 32, but now Makazole Mapimpi has the opportunity to get into that top 3 all-time Springbok try scorers. So what a game it was for him, and a number of other players, should I say, and we'll go through them in a minute, who scored their first international try. As I mentioned, the red card did force us to play with 14 men. And it's kind of unfortunate for me, in my opinion, because Andre Esterhuizen is looking to break into the side, and he did himself no favours with that red card. One can't blame him entirely, but I think it's just an unfortunate turn of events for him. We've got Damian Delende locking down that number 12 jersey, but Andre Esterhuizen, seeing how he's performed over for Harlequins, in great form at club level, but just at international level seems to be stop-start, really, and that red card cost us, in fact, and that's ultimately what led to the first try by Jose Pavo dos Santos And what a moment it was for him going over under the sticks in Bloemfontein. Kind of silenced the crowd, seeing Portugal get the first try. But I'm sure he'll take that moment and remember it for a very, very long time. As I mentioned, there were debutants in the likes of Jan-Hendrik Wessels, Johan Grobler, Pepsi Buthelezi, Andre Hugo Venter, Ruan Venter, Morne van der Berg, and Kjuan Horn. And amongst them, out of the 7 debutants, 4 of them got their first try on debut, and that was Jan-Hendrik Wessels, Pepsi Buthelezi, Andre Hugo Venter, who came off the bench, and Kjuan Horn. They had a bit of an interesting game, it must be said. Showed some little razzle-dazzle with the try on debut, but then also copped himself a yellow card late on in the game. Just finding himself out of position, really, in my opinion. No position to catch a ball that was kicked across in the air. Played the man in the air, got a yellow card. So South Africa at one stage were even down to 13 men. And that's the value, I guess, of a guy like Lukhanyo coming back in the number 13 jumper. He had to really manage the defense. Okay, it was against Portugal, not renowned to be able to give us too much damage in terms of questioning our defense, but he still had to man 2 positions at once, and he really showed that he's coming into his own. Of course, we have the likes of Jesse Kriel, who's holding down that 13 jumper, but Lukhanyo world class. It's going to be interesting to see how Rassie manages come the Rugby Championship between Jesse Kriel and Lukhanyo, but it looks like we're pretty stocked up when it comes to the number 13 jersey. On a bit of a downside, I would say, was the goal kicking for me, and that was Manie Libbok. And again, I'm not here to throw him under the bus. We saw in that first test against Ireland, Andre Pollard was really woeful with the boot. Came back strongly in that second test. But it just seems to be one occasion too many now for Manie Libbok. So I think maybe perhaps, again, just my opinion, it's almost like a little bit of a confidence thing. Maybe he feels he's down in the pecking order. And the Springboks do still back him. They got him in the number 10 jumper. But really, in a game like this, where the conditions were absolutely perfect for the goal kickers, 2 from 5 is just not a great return, not at this level. So Manie Libbok definitely is going to get some work done. I know Tony Brown has mentioned he's going to spend some time with him. But I think it's a confidence thing, because you're not going to be able to teach him how to kick. It's just that he has to get that confidence back in order to get himself in a position where he challenges Andre Pollard for that number 10 jersey, because there's a lot of players, in my opinion, breathing down his neck. Just reading a comment here from Lee Andre Bayers, who says, I would love to see a backline of Grant, Marnie, Cheslin, Sasha, Kainan, Kirtley, Fussy against Argentina. That seems to be a very good choice. If you look at the experience, you do have the likes of Cheslin there, Lee Andre Bayers. We've got Kainan Moody, who is coming back from injury. Kirtley Lawrence is on fire, of course, in that wing position. And Apalele Fussy, we'll touch a little bit on him a little bit later, but no doubt you're not going to see Rassie experiment too much against Australia and New Zealand, but perhaps in the return game, the last game of the Rugby Championship, that is, will be against Argentina, we might see those players coming through. It also all depends on how the championship goes. But just coming back to the Portugal game, as I mentioned, Jose Povo dos Santos scoring 2 tries and Duarte Torgai getting a try. So 3 tries that they managed to get against the Springboks. They'll take that as a win in itself, I'm sure, the Portuguese, as they head back. But for me, the rising stars of the day were no doubt the likes of Ben Jason Dixon and Sasha Feinberg and Gomez Zulu. We look at those 2 players as potentially being future Springbok legends, just with the way that they play, the intensity at which they play with, and in the moments where you need them to stand up, they were always there. Sasha Feinberg-Ngomezulu came on and kicked 5 out of 5 conversions, and that's just coming again back to the vital decision that needs to be made when you need someone to kick the points. You don't want to go with that 50-50 decision. So it'll be interesting to see where Rassie and the management fit in Sasha. Damian Willemse, of course, has to come back from injury. And then Andre Pollard still holding down that 10 jersey. So that's all to come. But if you see Portugal, in all fairness, and this is coming to the players who perhaps might be some question marks, I would like to hear your opinion. The likes of Evan Ruudz, Salman Murat getting his first opportunity to captain the Boks, so a proud moment for him. Apelele Fassi, as we spoke about earlier. Perhaps a couple of question marks surrounding their performance. I would say, in my opinion, they did the basics right. We saw a couple of carries from Evan Ruudz, Salman Murat getting in the thick of things in terms of cleaning, ball carrying as well. And Apelele Fassi setting up that try for Currie Oren, so no doubt shows his attacking prowess. But then it's just perhaps coming to the questions of positioning at fullback, where the likes of Willie Leroux obviously is so vital. So it's in these moments, I mean, Portugal, no disrespect to them whatsoever, for them coming off last year's World Cup, beating Fiji, a massive moment. So they're still finding their feet, I would say, in rugby at this level. They've produced some wonderful footballers in the likes of Eusebio, Cristiano Ronaldo, Luis Figo. But when it comes to rugby, and when I mentioned those names, you want to take that opportunity to show some spark and really put your foot down, because there's players that are breathing down your neck. If you think of Evan Ruudz, you've got the likes of Jasper Wiese, who still has to come back from his suspension. You've got the likes of Jean Klein coming back from injury, who will put pressure on Salman Murat. And as I mentioned earlier, Damian Willemse also has to come back, and he will challenge, no doubt, Willie Leroux. In my opinion, still the first choice fullback for the Springboks, just with his ability to have the vision and his ability to get into that 10 jersey and run the show. So it's those players that really perhaps didn't quite put up their hand, and it's not to throw any shade on them. Just as I said earlier with Moni Lebok, to represent your country is an honor, and they've done it with distinction in their games, especially the likes of Moni Lebok at the World Cup last year. So we don't want to throw them away. It's just that when an opportunity like this comes against Portugal, you really want to take it with both hands and feet if you can. As I mentioned, there are players who are coming back from injury. Look at the likes of Malcolm Marx, Peter Steph du Toit. I mentioned John Klein. Kanan Moody will be ready soon. Steven Kitsoff, Jasper Wiese coming back from suspension, Lure de Jager, Damian Willemse, Cameron Hanekom is really touted as perhaps the next option at number 8, behind the likes of Jasper Wiese. We saw, of course, Kwagga Smith hold down that position. So we really are stocked up, and there are players breathing down your neck. And I think to a degree that is a good thing, because it can get the best out of you knowing that you have to take your opportunity at this level. International rugby can sometimes be unforgiving. And of course, that was that from the Portuguese game. So the Springboks getting away there with a 64-21 victory. And again, yeah, Lee Andre Bayer says, as a Stormer supporter, it's hard to admit, but Evan really hasn't done himself any favors. Neither did Mani. So yeah, there are questions, and that's just from us as rugby fans. Again, we know the hard work that these players put in to get to that level. So it's not throwing any shade on them, but there are players within this group that are really, really breathing down the necks, waiting to take that opportunity and run with it. Just looking forward now, of course, South Africa is going to be hosting New Zealand in the Rugby Championship. But before they do that, They're going on tour to Australia, down under. Tie me, wallaby, down, mate. They're going to be there in Australia for 2 games. And I just want to take you through a little bit of stats in terms of under Russie's helm. South Africa have only managed to win 1 out of 5 games in Australia since Russie has taken over in 2018. So not a great return. We did win there, of course, in 2022. The last test in Australia that we played, we won that game by 24 points to 8. But just overall, looking at Russie's record against Australia, he's got 8 games played, 4 victories, 4 losses. So 50% return, he'd be looking to improve on that. And as the number 1 side in the world, we want to say that South Africa is going into those 2 games as favourites. But again, as South Africans, we also live off the fact that we like to be underdogs sometimes. So Russie won't mind that, but he'll definitely be looking to improve on that statistics. 1 from 5 in Australia. Of course, as I mentioned, we're hosting New Zealand then for 2 games, 1 in Ellis Park, and then, of course, in Cape Town and Ellis Park. No doubt a happy hunting ground for the All Blacks, with many famous victories there, of course. And I will take you through the history of Russie's return for games in South Africa. We've played 3 under Russie in South Africa, and we've got 1 from 3. We won in Loftus, or should I say New Zealand won in Loftus in 2018. In 2022, the Springboks won at the Mbombela Stadium, and then the All Blacks the following week defeated us at Ellis Park in 2022 in that famous victory. Of course, Russie's record versus New Zealand, of late it's been good, but as a whole, he's played 11 matches. We've won 5 games. That famous draw in 2019 with Herschel Jantjies going over for that try that was then converted by Andre Pollard to make it a 16-all draw, and the All Blacks winning 5 games as well. So pretty even on that front, but we know the rivalry between South Africa and New Zealand. Over 100 odd test matches that we've played against each other. So that's the real one, where the likes of Malcolm Marx perhaps, and your Willie Leroux's, your Damien Delendes will come back to feature. And then, of course, your Peter Steph du Toits, your Siya Kolisi's. We need the best of the best there. The question is, though, from my side, is can the Boks make it 3 out of 3 against New Zealand? We beat them, of course, at Twickenham in the World Cup warm-up match last year by 35 points to 7. We saw that famous 7-1 split on the bench that really got the tongues wagging. People talking about this Springbok bomb squad. What is next? Do we see a 8-0? But we absolutely demolished the All Blacks on that occasion. And then, of course, more recently, the famous World Cup victory last year by 12 points to 11. And the question is, can we do it and make it 3 out of 3? We have, in fact, on 1 occasion, as I mentioned, out of those 100-odd test matches, we have done it once, and that was in 2009, where we won our 2 home games, and we actually ended up travelling to Hamilton and defeating the All Blacks by 32 points to 29, and that was under Peter de Villiers. So in 100-odd test matches, we've only managed to beat the All Blacks 3 times in a row on 1 single occasion. So that'll be an interesting one. That will be the rivalry that everyone's waiting for. Razor Robertson versus Rassie Erasmus. Of course, Scott Robertson, one of the most decorated All Black coaches at club level, and now taken over the All Blacks. And of course, they're on a run of their own, beating England at home and then doing away with Fiji pretty much. It's that first 2 games against Australia that I think South Africa must stay focused on, but I'm sure Russie, no doubt, will have that in mind, to take each game as it comes, not to look too far ahead. Australia under Joe Schmidt have somewhat struggled through to get past Wales. They won the 2 test matches there, and then we saw them getting over the line against Georgia, but it was also quite a test match. But we're not going to use that and underestimate Australia one little bit. But no doubt, the All Blacks in South Africa, that's the one we're all going to be waiting for. The eyes are going to be glued on the screen for the Kappa of Pango and the All Blacks. We're waiting for them. We want them. It's going to be simply sensational. Then, of course, it's going to be a 1-1 game against Argentina, 1 away, 1 home. But if I look at Rassie's record against Argentina, he's played 10 matches. We've got 9 victories, and the single loss was in Mendoza in 2018. So since then, the Springboks have really put the screws on Argentina, but no doubt they're a side that can't be underestimated. We saw them win in New Zealand for the first time. So Argentina definitely not just there to participate. That will be the fixtures for the Rugby Championship. So it's 2 games in Australia first up. The squad selection is going to be interesting. As I mentioned, the likes of Ben Jason Dixon. Has he done just enough, in my opinion? Yes, to make that full squad and perhaps get into the starting 23. Of course, we still got Marco van Staden on the bench. We've got the likes of Quagga Smith, Jasper Wiese. So there at loose forward, we are really blessed as the world champs to make a pick, and each player will bring value. But no doubt Ben Jason Dixon, a man for the future. And then, of course, Sasha Feinberg and Gomez Zulu could squeeze himself into the 23 as well, simply because of his versatility, in my opinion. But the actual squad itself, it will be interesting to see once the players who come back from injury as well, how they go about forging this squad, because the Rugby Championship is not won in week 1. We're traveling away, we're coming home, and then it's away and home again. So it's a long stretch, and you need the best of the best, in my opinion. I'm just reading a comment here from Neil Nielsen, who asks, would you start Grant Williams over Faf? For me personally, I think Grant Williams is coming into his own. Faf de Klerk has that experience, but also, in my opinion, against the Irish, he wasn't quite becoming of the Faf that we actually know. But no doubt the Faf and Andre combination, Rassie Erasmus, will probably back that one. But you see the young, fresh, intense, skillful, quick version of a Grant Williams is just putting his hand up more and more. We saw in that game against Ireland when he kicked the ball downfield, chased, tackled Osborne into touch, how quick he is. But no doubt the player for the future is the likes of Grant Williams. Of course, we got Jaden Hendrickse still in the mix as well. So I think in every area, since Rassie has taken over, he's actually built up a scenario where each player who takes over from the other can be just as good, perhaps offering something different. But what you gain on the swings, you lose on the roundabout. And in that, I mean, we will still have that number 1 championship status. We won't lose anything in terms of the skill of the player. They might just have some sort of different skill. Again, yeah, Lee Andre Bayer says, my backline selection was more one for the future than the best backline. I hear you, my brother. So in that sense, yes, there are a couple of players who are aging. We look at the likes of your Damien Delendes, your Pollards, your Willie Leroux's. Can they squeeze one more World Cup in? And then do you just have those players coming through learning from the likes of Andre Pollard? So for me personally, for the future, we're looking very, very good. Just unfortunate that the junior box are not up to standard at the moment. And I guess our bar has been raised quite high in terms of what we expect as South Africans. But it's just our love for the game that we have these sort of opinions. But at the end of the day, each player that's there, that's been selected in the squad, we look at the likes of Pepsi Buthelezi, of course, being touted as perhaps the next similar player to Siya Kolisi. But perhaps he just wants to be Pepsi Buthelezi. and just have the opportunity to showcase his skills. Got a try on debut. So we're going to give these players a chance to get themselves into the swing of things. They just need to grab it, in my opinion, with both hands. And as I mentioned, we singled out Ben Jason Dixon and Sasha Feinberg and Gomez Zulu. But if this was an audition for the World 15, they would actually be right up there and make the World 15 in an instant. I'm sure there's a lot of other coaches who will be taking a look at their footage and preparing for them as well. So it's wonderful to see players challenging. I mean, Ben Jason Dixon, to take over from a guy like Peter Steph du Toit would be such an honor for him to be even spoken in the same category, but he's right up there and he's come from perhaps absolutely nowhere. That's the wonderful thing, grabbing your opportunity where you can. I think Damian Willemse should be ready, Neil, by September, so he might be available for the Argentina games. I know he got injured in April. They said 4 months. All depends on the rehabilitation, of course. But no doubt the Rugby Championship is what we're looking forward to. And I think if we just go back to our Springbok DNA, which we sort of lost our way a little bit in that Irish second test, the one line out that we perhaps needed to manage the game just a little bit better towards the end of that game where Markov and started, unfortunately, knocked it on. It wasn't his fault, but they just threw the ball over the top. Single runner going into contact perhaps wasn't the best option. The Springboks are renowned for a strong maul. We scrum well. We're wonderful to have the likes of Kitshoff back. We can call on the likes of Oxenche. Jan-Hendrik Wessels coming through as a player for the future. Trevor Nyakane is still in the mix. Werner Koch. So we've got a strong scrum, strong front row, strong 8-man scrum, no doubt. We're physical in our carries. I think we got to stick to that. The intensity at which we defend, our speed off the line, that's going to all play a part in the Rugby Championship, in my opinion. And then, of course, I think if we focus on all those things in terms of our Springbok DNA, we can then add that little bit of spice of Tony Brown on attack. We shouldn't get too carried away with trying to do too much too soon. And I guess as South African fans, we shouldn't expect too much too soon from the Springboks. But if we stick to those basics, I think we can challenge in this Rugby Championship and take the title. Of course, New Zealand under Robertson, no doubt, are going to have their own DNA. But we know that more than likely the All Blacks are going to run us or try and run us off our feet. They like clear conditions. They like the ball to move around. But we have to as well be adaptable to play to these sort of conditions. There's no point in us just setting ourselves on a kick chase game plan and the All Blacks running back at us, doing what they do best. We want to control the tempo. But of course, that will depend on the conditions on the day. So in my opinion, the team that can best adapt to the conditions and have a few game plans in place, especially with such tight margins between the four sides. Argentina can beat Australia. Australia can beat New Zealand. New Zealand can beat us. We can beat Australia. So it's going to be a very contestable Rugby Championship, in my opinion. Obviously, the other three teams are hunting for the Springboks. They want to get up in the world rankings. We're sitting a little bit comfortably at the moment, but one loss against the All Blacks and that could all change. No doubt we are obviously still building towards the World Cup, but the World Cup is 3 years away, so we want to focus on this year and what we have available. So the players also who did put their hand up, no doubt going to be in contention moving forward. Doesn't mean to say the likes of Evan Ruudz, as I mentioned, or Fussy, they had their last dance. There's nothing, in my opinion, that would suggest that. I just think they want to grab the opportunity and be part of it as often as they can and really give Rassie and them something to scratch their head about. then they're just going to have to pick up that spark just a little bit. I'm just reading here. Neil Nielsen says, I think we need to get rid the Australian hoodoo. Yeah, that's the other one for me. 1 out of 5 in Australia. Sometimes that can be a monkey on your back. But no doubt there's going to be proper preparation for this test match. Australia are going to come with their own shrewd ways of trying to get to the Springboks. They perhaps don't have the most physical pack, but they do have the tactical prowess, in my opinion, to give us a hard time. But the last time we were in Australia, we did win. So history is history. We've got to look forward to making our own history now in this Rugby Championship. And I think for Argentina, in my opinion, as I mentioned, a strong side. They scrum well, they play hard, but they also like to be very disruptive. So we've got to adapt to each situation. And that's something that makes us who we are, the world champions, no doubt. And Ireland perhaps might be thinking that they are, in their own mind, the number one side in the world. We'll let the world rankings talk for itself, and we'll let the World Cup talk for itself. It's safe with the Springboks. Obviously, we want to go back to back to back, but it's preparation now to bleed these young players in. Just taking the last question here. Do you think Jasper comes back in the number 8 jersey post-suspension? When is his suspension over? I think it will be by the second test in Australia. And I do think there is a warrant for him at number 8. We know Quagga Smith did a good job holding down the fort at number 8 against Ireland. But we also like to see Quagga come off the bench and add that real impact. And there's nothing anymore about the bench being the second best player. As we said, when you come off the bench, you're the finisher, but you're just as good as the starter, and each player has his own role. I think Jasper Wiese at number 8, for me, in my personal opinion, would be the best option. We know we spoke about the likes of Cameron Hanekom. He's yet to play. It'll be interesting to see how they manage him come the Rugby Championship, should he be in the squad. And then, of course, Evan Roos, no doubt, is not just going to be thrown away. There's just areas, I think, where the technical guys take a look at all this sort of footage. They'll come up with a package and a squad of players that will really push for this Rugby Championship. And I think from my side, seeing the Portugal game, see the debutant score a try, what a proud moment. We saw RUgby Championship become the 16th father-son combination. Where in the world anybody would love that sort of scenario, to be in and follow in the footsteps of your dad. So a really proud moment. Pepsi Buthelezi, as I mentioned, scored a try. And then in his first start, Ben Jason Dixon scoring a try as well. Mapimpi with the hat-trick. Makazola Mapimpi. Over again and again and again. Will you believe it? Try number 30 in only his 43rd appearance. That's a 70% ratio of scoring. And I think any winger in World Rugby would crave to have such a ratio. So special shout out to Makazola Mapimpi. We saw the RG Snyman offloads. It's just in a tighter game, like I mentioned, perhaps against New Zealand. He might not have that sort of luxury, but we've seen him come off the bench as well. But no doubt it'll be the likes of Eben Etzebeth will hold down that number 4 jersey, bring that physicality, the Jasper Wieses, the Malcolm Marks, the Siya Kolisi, holding us and binding us together as South Africans. That's what we want to see. We are united together. We are South African, the rugby fans first, but we South Africans in our heart. We share one common goal, and that's to get through any sort of adversity that comes our way. So it's going to be an interesting squad selection. I think from myself, Ruudz, I'm excited, as I'm sure you all are, to see what the Springboks can do. Can they hold down that number 1 world ranking as they go to the end of year tour? But it's been an absolute pleasure to take you through this one. This is Monday afternoon news. Obrigados, Portugal, I beg your pardon. It's now vamos. Rugby Championship time. Let's go, Springboks. It's going to be simply sensational. Until next time, I say bye for now.